Hi, everyone. I'm Matthew Blackwell. I'm a theater teacher at Lillian Osborne High School. I'm working from home, as you can see. And today I'm going to be talking about the concept of critique and feedback in improvisation. So the specific curricular outcome that we're going to be looking at today, I'm just going to pull it up on the screen here. We are talking about the Drama 10 improvisation curricular outcome: critique the work of self and others through observation and expression of specific detail. So, the thing we have to keep in mind, though, is that critique and feedback is connected to every single skill in improvisation. It's the method that we use to build skills in improv and to grow as improvisers. And because of the ephemeral nature of improv, it's basically impossible, or at least not very advisable, to work and rework the same scenes over and over again as you would with scripted work, because then we're not really improvising. Instead, with critique and improv, it should be centered more around the idea of recognizing the elements of the scene that went well. And that can be in lots of different categories. It can be narratively, it can be in terms of comedy, if you're aiming for comedy. It can be in terms of how truthful the scene is, if that's, well, we should always be aiming for that. In terms of characterization, stakes, and even basic improv skills of making and accepting offers. The list goes on and on. And then any areas of improvement for those same things. So while it's fine to discuss the specifics of a scene, it's really much more important to discuss the specifics in connection to skills. So for the purposes of critique and feedback, the framework that I use and that I give to my students is the Canadian Improv Games, specifically the skills section. So I'm going to pull that up for you right now. If you don't or haven't used the website improv.ca, which is the Canadian Improv Games website, it is a fantastic resource. You can find this rubric on there. And we'll go into more detail about this rubric later on in the video. But I really like this because it breaks down all of the essential skills that an improviser should be working towards, whether it's for the Canadian Improv Games or not. Okay. So, in an ideal world, the warm-up that you would do for critiquing improv would be the same warm-up that you would do to actually perform some improv, because the best critique comes from people who understand what the performing of improv looks like. So those would be your whooshes, your zip zap zops, etc. But on top of that, the main goal of warming up right now for the purposes of critiquing improv would be to increase focus and concentration. So if you have a partner or a group of people at some point, you could play 21, which is a personal favorite of mine. This is where you have to count to 21 as a group, and you can't have more than one person say the same number at the same time. And if you do, you have to go back to the start. If, however, you're like me and you're flying solo and you just want to learn about critiquing improv, maybe we can just do a short breathing exercise so that your mind is clear and you're ready to go for critiquing improv. So we're just going to do a short breathing exercise. So as much as you can, sit up or stand up, and you're just going to breathe in on 2 counts. You're going to hold for 2 counts, and then you're going to breathe out, and you're going to do all that through your nose. So here we go. Breathe in, hold, and breathe out. Do that again. But then you can up that to 4 counts, and this time you can alternate between breathing through your nose and breathing through your mouth. So why don't this time let's go, let's have you breathe in through your nose and breathe out through your mouth on a 4 count. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4, and breathe out. And let's do that one more time. All right, I feel warmed up. I don't know about you. Um, okay, so in improv, there are many possibilities. And similarly, there are many guidelines about how to develop great improvised scenes, which I'm sure you'll find out about in other videos in this series or from your drama teachers or what have you. So for the purposes of my classes and how I approach rules, I operate with three basic rules in improv. I know other people have different ways of wording these things, but they all kind of boil down to the same thing. So the three rules I have are say yes and avoid, say yes and avoid blocking. Okay. The second one is no wimping or waffling, and no destruction is the third rule. So all three of those are variations on the same rule, which is to not shut down a scene through the use of the word no. As soon as we say no to an offer, um, we the scene stops, right? We can't move forward. So we want to build on offers, and we want to build that trust between our team members or our fellow actors to be able to give good offers that we want to say yes to, that we want to build on top of with an and. So the second rule, wimping or waffling, if you've never heard those terms, this is the thing that happens in improv from time to time where actors don't commit to action immediately. Either they wimp out by not committing, or they're waffling by talking for too long about the action that they may or may not commit to, which means that in the meantime, not much is actually happening on stage. My final rule, destruction. This can also be thought of as derailment, so taking the scene too far outside of the circle of expectations by either completely derailing it or by literally just blowing it up, killing characters, etc. This isn't to say that scenes can't go in offbeat directions, but if somebody sets something up, we don't want to just destroy it. So those are my three rules. Say yes and, no wimping or waffling, no destruction. So from that basic framework, let's now get into the elements that make up a solid improvised scene. So the first three that are things that I'm always looking for, whether I have a rubric or not, whether I'm just out watching some improv. These are the things that I think about and that make a good scene for me. So first of all, I look at narrative. So this is the storytelling. So when I'm thinking about narrative, I think about how efficiently and in what rhythm, with what amount of detail and interest does a scene move through the 5 parts or beats of an improv scene. So as a review, those 5 beats are the platform, the initial incident, raising the stakes, the climax, and the resolution. I'm sure if you are working with improv at all, you'll go into those with more detail, but those 5 beats kind of have to happen in every single improv scene to tell a good, coherent story. The second thing I look at is the circle of expectations. So this is something I mentioned before. Basically, we want to think about are players utilizing the information and the offers that have been set up in each earlier beat and building upon that? Or are there too many extraneous details coming in from outside of this circle? So the platform is really, really important in a scene because that gives us our setting, our characters, our relationship. And then from that and our initial incident, basically we've already established everything the scene is going to utilize, right? That's not to say that new things can't be added, but we want to make sure that every single beat is building upon the previous beat. That's the way that a good improv scene works. And then finally, the third thing that I'm always looking for are the characters. So are the characters detailed, unique, easily readable from their first entrance? Like, do we get a sense right away who this character is? That's really important in improv because we're not using costumes, we're not using props generally. And so we want to know who these characters are right away. We also want to get a sense of what they want in the scene and whether they're pursuing their objectives throughout the scene. Just like in any other good scripted scene, characters want things and they pursue them. And then finally, does the audience care about this character and do we care about their objective? Okay. So then those are the 3 basics, but we can build on top of that. And this is where I would start to use the Canadian Improv Games skills rubric as well. So I'll pull that back up here and let's go through that rubric. Okay, so with the Canadian Improv Games rubric, the headings that we have here are making offers, accepting offers, advancing, listening, commitment, endowing and feeding, stakes, staging. These are the main skills that I would be looking at. These are ones that should apply in literally every single improv scene that you ever see. So this rubric is great because it describes each of these headings in more detail. So something I would suggest when you're starting out, doing some feedback, some critique, is maybe even just having a paper copy of this rubric handy so that you can be looking for these specific things while you're watching scenes. So the basics are making offers, which is creating new information that then gets accepted by the other players on stage. Advancing is, like we were talking about before, moving through those 5 beats of the story. Listening, are the actors listening to each other on stage? Are they picking up on subtle details like it can be physical details, it can be verbal details. Listening doesn't just happen with the words that are being said, it's kind of paying attention to the scene as a whole while the actors are in the middle of it. Commitment, are they showing commitment to the scene, to each other, and to their ideas? If they come in as a character, are they really committing to that character, or are they dropping that character? Those sorts of things. Endowing is this idea in improv where we are giving information to our other players and telling them new things that they don't know already. So this is kind of, you can think of it almost as like giving a present to the other players, where before the scene started, I had no idea I was going to be playing, I don't know, a butcher. And in the middle of the scene, somebody tells me that information, and now I've been endowed with that. So looking for endowing. Stakes. So stakes can come in sort of 3 forms. We can see character stakes, which is kind of what we were talking about before, where characters want things and pursue them, and we care about what they want. We can see narrative stakes, like that idea of whatever our initial incident is, making it more intense, making it worse, whatever that looks like. And then finally, global stakes. So what is at stake for the entire world that we set up in this scene? And then finally, staging. And staging, you're going to follow those same sort of rules you would for any other scene, where the important action is being highlighted. We're utilizing levels. Players are being seen and heard and utilizing the space well. So if you want to take a closer look at that rubric, you can find it on improv.ca. And I would highly suggest using it. Okay, so now how do you actually start to give and receive feedback? So you've looked at this rubric, you're starting to understand some of these things. How do you actually deliver this information to other improvisers? So I personally believe that feedback is best given once you yourself are comfortable with the vocabulary, you're able to recognize the skills in action, and crucially that you have at least some familiarity with utilizing the skills yourself. I personally believe that improv is a communal experience, and it's important that feedback comes from this place of gracious humility that's born out of collective solidarity. So I don't believe that good feedback in improv comes from simply watching. I believe it's best to be a participant as well. That way you kind of understand where all of this comes from. You kind of understand what it's like to be in a situation where you're making it up on the, off the top of your dome. So to give great feedback, I would suggest a few things. So first, if you're the type of person who uses a journal or a notebook, it's really not a bad idea to jot down a few of the things you're noticing while watching a scene, referring back to that CIG rubric and looking for specifics regarding the skills listed on there. Believe me, improv scenes can vanish before you even know it, and having a record isn't a bad idea. If you're not the type who writes things down, Just really try to do your best to store your talking points in your old memory brain until the scene is complete. Unless you're an improv coach or a teacher, I wouldn't suggest, or I would suggest letting scenes play out from start to finish before giving critique, as each beat in improv builds upon the previous one, like we said. Instead of stopping and starting, it's more effective to simply perform lots of scenes. So try not to stop and start with your feedback. Let a scene play out, then give your feedback. So in my drama classes, the way that I ask students to provide feedback is it always comes in two categories, and you can call them whatever you want. I call them things that we're cooking and things to work on. So this way we're always celebrating successes and looking at elements that need a bit more work constructively, and it keeps the tone light and positive. So you should always aim to give feedback that is specific to the skills that are being worked on, and utilize specifics from the scene to back up your critiques. So you don't want to talk for too long about the specific details of the story, unless it's to say, oh, you know that part where you befriended the giant and moved into his treetop village. That was such a great example of setting a platform, right? Always bring it back to the skills and don't focus too much on the specifics unless that's what it's about. Okay? As an improviser, so you're being given this feedback, it's really important to simply accept that feedback and then move towards integrating that feedback into your future work. You don't want to get into a situation where you're disagreeing with the person who's giving the feedback, even if you do disagree, right? I've been in that situation before. The best way to handle that is to simply accept your feedback and then try to find those nuggets of truth about the skills that you're trying to work on and integrate it the next time you work on it. So if everyone is giving and receiving feedback openly, then it shouldn't be necessary for any one person to give more than one piece of positive and constructive criticism each. Try not to have any one person dominating the conversation. You want to hear from all kinds of people who are giving feedback. Okay, so now that's a ton of information that I've thrown at you. If you want to try practicing this, the way that I would suggest is obviously try to see and do some actual improv. If, however, you're alone for some reason, perhaps global pandemic, who knows, what I would suggest is, again, the Canadian Improv Games films all of their finals in Ottawa each year. And so you can actually check out the filmed Canadian Improv Games from 2019, which can be found on the CIG's YouTube channel. And I'm going to pull that up for you right now. And here it is. So this is the 2019 finals, CIG 42 in Ottawa. You can see this is a 2-hour and 40-minute video. So there's a ton of improv. You get to see at least one, definitely more than one example of each of the different styles of Canadian Improv Games, which might be very different from what you're doing. But each of these scenes are going to be demonstrating those skills that we talked about earlier. So you can find the Canadian Improv Games YouTube channel, also through improv.ca, and I would highly recommend that. Okay, so what I would suggest if you're working with that video is, like we were saying before, try using that CIG rubric and just jotting down some notes each time you notice maybe a time where an improviser makes a good offer and then has that offer accepted. So just start with maybe one of those aspects from the CIG rubric, and then see how many times this occurs in a scene. Do scenes with a higher number of made and accepted offers have a higher success rate? That might be interesting, right? So once you've done this, then you want to start to look at some of the other individual skills and looking only for that skill in the scene until you've developed your familiarity with all of the skills, and you can look for all of them simultaneously. If you ever get back into a situation where you're seeing improv live and able to give feedback in person, that's really the best way to do it, in my opinion. you can do the same thing as well. You can focus on maybe one skill or 3 skills. You don't have to look at absolutely everything. And if everybody in your group is doing the same thing, then you should be fine. Okay, so in summary, your skills in giving critique will only improve as you gain further experience with both participating in and watching improv. And my recommendation is to see as much improv, both competitive and non-competitive, both short form and long form as you can. You can find lots of great improv videos on YouTube. Upright Citizens Brigade has a number of videos online. You can always watch CIGs. You can watch other improv that you find there. But live improv is the best experience. So getting really familiar with lots of different types of improv and with all those skills, this is the key, being able to watch improv with a critical eye towards its structure and its skill set. Yeah, thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions, you can feel free to contact me at any time. My email is matthew.blackwell@epsb.ca. Thanks for watching, everybody, and happy improv.